The gun wasn't pointed at Caleb Hayes, it was pointed at his daughter. That's when everything changed. Not when the black SUVs rolled into his driveway, not when the men in expensive suits stepped onto his porch, but when one of them aimed a weapon at 8-year-old Nora, who stood frozen in her unicorn pajamas, clutching a stuffed rabbit named Mr. Whiskers. "Where is she?" the lead man asked, his voice cold as January rain. Caleb's heart hammered against his ribs. 3 days ago, he'd been a nobody, a single father working double shifts just to keep the lights on. Now he stood between armed strangers and the only person in the world who mattered to him, all because of a woman he barely knew. A woman who'd walked into his life like smoke through a screen door and turned everything upside down. But here's the thing about Caleb Hayes. He'd already lost everything once: his wife, his career, his faith in tomorrow. He had nothing left to lose except Nora. And that made him dangerous. If you want to know how a broken-down mechanic ends up staring down hired guns in his own living room, stick around. This story goes places you won't expect. Drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this tale travels. And hit that like button if you're ready for a story about what happens when ordinary people face extraordinary choices. The check engine light had been on for 3 weeks. Caleb knew he should fix it. Hell, he could fix it. He'd spent 15 years as an automotive engineer before everything fell apart. Back when he wore pressed shirts and had health insurance. Back when Sarah was alive and Nora still believed her daddy could solve any problem in the world. Now he drove a 2008 Honda Civic with a dying transmission and pretended not to notice when the steering wheel shook above 50 miles per hour. "Daddy, you're doing it again." Caleb glanced at the rearview mirror. Nora sat in her booster seat, backpack clutched to her chest, watching him with those two knowing eyes. 8 years old, and already she could read him like a repair manual. "Doing what, Peanut?" "The face, the worried face." "I don't have a worried face." "You do. Your eyebrow gets all scrunchy." She demonstrated, wrinkling her forehead in an exaggerated imitation that might have been funny if it wasn't so accurate. Caleb forced himself to relax his expression. "Just thinking about work stuff." "Is Mr. Patterson being mean again?" "Mr. Patterson's not mean. He's just—" Caleb searched for a word that wouldn't require explanation. "Particular." "Mom used to say particular was just a nice word for—" "Your mom said a lot of things." The words came out sharper than he intended. He softened his tone. "We're running late. You got your homework?" Nora nodded, but her smile had dimmed. Caleb cursed himself silently. 4 years since Sarah's death, and he still couldn't talk about her without bleeding all over the conversation. Riverside Elementary came into view, a squat brick building that had needed renovation since before Caleb was born. He pulled into the drop-off lane behind a parade of minivans and SUVs that cost more than he'd earned in the past 2 years combined. "Love you, Peanut." He twisted around to look at her properly. "Chen's picking you up today, remember? I've got the late shift." "I know." Nora unbuckled herself with practiced efficiency. "Daddy?" "Yeah?" "Your eyebrow's doing it again." Before he could respond, she'd slipped out of the car and disappeared into the crowd of children. Caleb watched until she reached the entrance, then merged back into traffic, the transmission grinding in protest. His phone buzzed. A text from Patterson. "Where are you?" "Mitchell called in sick. Need you on the floor." Caleb glanced at the dashboard clock. He had 17 minutes before his shift started, and the garage was 20 minutes away. He pressed the accelerator. The Civic shuddered, but obeyed. Patterson's auto repair occupied a corner lot between a check cashing place and a boarded-up laundromat. The sign out front promised honest work at honest prices, which Caleb had always found ironic considering Patterson charged $70 an hour for labor that should have cost $50. The garage bay door was already open. Caleb parked in the gravel lot and grabbed his thermos. 3-day-old coffee reheated in a microwave that barely worked. He'd meant to make a fresh pot this morning, but Nora couldn't find her math workbook, and by the time they'd torn apart the apartment looking for it, there was no time for luxuries like hot coffee. "You're late." Patterson didn't look up from his clipboard. He was a thick man with perpetually grease-stained hands and a comb-over he thought disguised his baldness. It didn't. "Mitchell's sick. I'm here to cover." "You're still late." Patterson made a show of checking his watch. "That's twice this week, Hayes." Caleb bit back his first response. And his second. "What have we got?" Patterson thrust the clipboard at him. Oil change on the Subaru, brake pads on the Ford, and that Lexus needs a full diagnostic. Customer says it's making a weird noise. They always make weird noises. Yeah, well, this customer's paying $200 for us to find out which weird noise it is. Patterson's gaze traveled to Caleb's Civic with undisguised disdain. Maybe if you spent less time driving that piece of junk and more time showing up on time, you wouldn't be working late every night. Caleb's jaw tightened. The Civic runs fine. The Civic's been burning oil since before Trump left office. I can smell it from here. I'll look at it when I have time. You don't have time. You got 3 cars waiting, and I need the Lexus done by noon. Patterson turned to leave, then paused. And Hayes? Next time you're late, we're having a different conversation. Caleb watched him retreat into the office, then released a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. 6 months he'd worked here. 6 months of Patterson's condescension and below-market wages, and trying to remember that having a terrible job was still better than having no job at all. He drained the last of his cold coffee and headed for the Subaru. The morning crawled past in a haze of routine. Oil changes he could do blindfolded. Brake pads he'd replaced 1,000 times. The work was mindless, which meant his brain had space to wander into dangerous territory. Money. Always money. Rent was due in 8 days, and he was short by $300. Nora needed new shoes. Her current pair was held together with duct tape and prayer. The electric bill was already a month overdue. And then there was the letter from the hospital, the one he'd shoved into a drawer without opening because he already knew what it said. Collections agency, final notice, your credit's already destroyed, so why not destroy it more thoroughly? Hey, Hayes! Caleb looked up from the Ford's brake assembly to find Tommy Mitchell standing in the bay door. Tommy was supposed to be sick, but he looked healthy enough, just tired, with the particular exhaustion that came from being 23 and working 2 jobs while going to community college. Thought you called in. I did, but I left my textbook in my locker. Tommy hesitated. You okay, man? You look... I'm fine. You sure? Because you've been torquing that same lug nut for like 5 minutes. Caleb glanced down. Tommy was right. He released the wrench and straightened. Late night. Nora keeping you up? Nora's fine. Everything's fine. The words came out automatically now, a reflex. Go get your book before Patterson sees you and decides you're healthy enough to work. Tommy nodded, but didn't move. Listen, I know it's none of my business, but if you ever need... Sarah was always good to me when I first started here, and I just thought, I said, I'm fine. Caleb heard the edge in his voice and tried to soften it. But thanks, really. Tommy retreated. Caleb returned to the brake pads, forcing himself to focus. Work was the only thing that kept the thoughts at bay. Work and Nora. Everything else was just noise. By 11:30, he'd finished the Ford and moved on to the Lexus. The customer complaint was vague, weird noise when turning left, which meant he'd probably spend an hour tracking down a loose heat shield or a failing wheel bearing that the owner had been ignoring for months. He was elbow deep in the wheel well when Patterson appeared again. Got another one for you? Caleb didn't look up. I'm still on the Lexus. This one's priority. Just came in. Patterson's tone had shifted from its usual irritation to something else, something Caleb couldn't quite identify. Owner's waiting. I told you I'd have the Lexus done by noon. Hayes, look at me. Caleb extracted himself from under the car and stood. Patterson's expression was strange, not angry, but cautious, almost uncertain. What's going on? There's a woman in the office, says her car's making noise but won't describe the problem. Won't even tell me what kind of car it is. Patterson lowered his voice. She asked for you specifically. Me? By name. Said she'd wait until you were available. Patterson's eyes narrowed. You know her? I don't know any... Caleb stopped. His mind raced through possibilities and came up empty. What's she look like? See for yourself. Patterson jerked his thumb toward the office. But Hayes, whatever this is, handle it quick. I don't need drama in my shop. Caleb wiped his hands on a rag and crossed the garage floor. Through the office window he could see her, a woman sitting in one of the uncomfortable plastic chairs they kept for customers. She wore dark jeans and a gray sweater, her black hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. Even from a distance, there was something deliberate about her stillness, like a cat pretending to sleep while actually tracking every movement in the room. He pushed through the door. "I'm Caleb Hayes. I understand you asked for me." She looked up, and Caleb felt the world tilt sideways. Her eyes were the color of slate before a storm, gray with hints of blue and something else, something that made you want to look away and look closer at the same time. Her face was all angles, sharp cheekbones, defined jaw, a mouth that suggested she didn't smile often, but when she did, you'd remember it. She stood. She was tall, maybe 5'9", and moved with the kind of economy that came from training or necessity or both. "Thank you for seeing me." Her voice was lower than he expected, controlled. "My car's making an unusual sound. I was told you're the best mechanic here." Whoever told you that was exaggerating. Caleb tried to place her. There was something familiar about her, like a song he'd heard once but couldn't name. "Have we met?" "No." "But you asked for me by name." "I did my research." She met his gaze without flinching. "I don't trust easily. When my car has a problem, I want it fixed by someone competent." "Research," Caleb repeated the word slowly. "What kind of research?" "The thorough kind." She pulled keys from her pocket. "Should I bring it around?" Every instinct Caleb had developed over 32 years of life was screaming at him. This woman wasn't here about a car. The way she held herself, the precision of her words, the fact that she'd somehow learned his name and sought him out, none of it made sense. But Patterson was watching through the window, and Caleb couldn't afford to lose this job over paranoia. "Yeah," he said finally. "Bay 3. I'll meet you there." She nodded once and walked past him. As she did, Caleb caught the scent of something, not perfume exactly, but rain and cedar and something else he couldn't identify. Patterson appeared in the doorway as soon as she left. "Well?" "She wants the car looked at." "That's it?" "That's it." "You're sure you don't know her?" Caleb watched through the window as a black Mercedes sedan pulled around to Bay 3. "I'm sure." But he wasn't. Not really. The Mercedes was immaculate, a recent model, maybe 2 years old, with custom wheels and tinted windows. It purred into the bay like a satisfied predator. The woman emerged and stood to the side, hands in her pockets, waiting. Caleb approached cautiously. "What's the problem?" "When I accelerate above 60, there's a vibration through the steering wheel, and a sound, high-pitched, intermittent." "How long's it been doing this?" 3 days. Caleb walked around the car looking for obvious issues. The tires were new, properly inflated, no visible damage to the body. "You hit anything recently? Curb? Pothole?" "No." "And it only happens above 60? "Yes." He popped the hood. The engine bay was as clean as the exterior. No leaks, no loose hoses, everything exactly where it should be. Too clean, actually. This car had either been meticulously maintained or barely driven. "I'll need to take it for a test drive," Caleb said. "That okay with you?" She hesitated, just for a second, but he noticed. "How long?" 15, 20 minutes. Another pause. Then, "I'll wait here." "You don't want to come. Most people like to point out exactly where the noise. I trust you'll find it." There it was again. That word, trust. She used it like a weapon. Caleb climbed into the driver's seat. The interior smelled like leather and that same indefinable scent he'd noticed before. The seat was positioned perfectly for someone her height. He had to adjust it before pulling out. He drove the Mercedes through Riverside's main streets, gradually increasing speed. At 62 miles per hour, he felt it, a subtle vibration through the wheel, accompanied by a faint whining sound that cycled with the engine RPM's wheel bearing, probably. Maybe a warped rotor, but something nagged at him. The woman's behavior, the way she'd known his name, the careful distance she maintained. He turned down a side street and pulled over, letting the engine idle. On impulse, he opened the glove compartment. The registration was there, neatly folded. He pulled it out. The car was registered to Celine Ward with an address in Portland. The registration was dated 6 months ago. Celine Ward. The name meant nothing to him. He'd never heard it before. But as he sat there in her expensive car on a quiet street in a town too small for people like her, Caleb knew with absolute certainty that this woman was running from something. And somehow, she'd decided he could help. He returned to the garage 20 minutes later and parked the Mercedes in Bay 3. Celine, he could think of her by name now, was exactly where he'd left her, standing with that preternatural stillness. "Well?" she asked. "Front passenger wheel bearing. Maybe the rotor too. I'd need to pull the wheel to be sure." He climbed out and handed her the keys. "It's not dangerous yet, but you should get it fixed soon." "Can you do it today?" Caleb glanced at Patterson's office. "I've got 2 other cars ahead of you. Earliest I could start would be tomorrow morning." "I'll pay extra." "It's not about double your normal rate." Caleb stopped. "Why?" "Because I need it fixed today." "No, I mean, why me? Why this garage?" He took a step closer, lowering his voice. "You drove a $60,000 Mercedes to a strip mall auto shop in Riverside, asked for a mechanic by name, and now you're offering to pay double to get it done immediately. So I'll ask you again. Why?" Celine's expression didn't change, but something flickered behind her eyes. "I told you. I did my research." "Research doesn't explain how you know my name. We've never met. I don't advertise. Hell, I barely exist online anymore." The words were tumbling out now, fueled by confusion and the low-grade panic that had been building since she walked into the office. "So either you're going to tell me what's really going on, or you can take your car somewhere else." For a long moment, she just looked at him. Then so quietly, he almost missed it. "I need help." "With your wheel bearing?" "With more than that." Caleb's pulse quickened. "I don't know what you think I can—" "You were an automotive engineer at Titan Industries, senior design specialist. You held 3 patents related to electric vehicle systems." She recited the facts like reading from a file. "You left the company 4 years ago after your wife died. Since then, you've worked a series of low-level mechanic jobs while raising your daughter alone." The world seemed to contract around him. "How the hell do you know about Nora?" "I'm not a threat to your daughter, Mr. Hayes. She stopped, seeming to reconsider her words. "I needed someone with your specific background, someone who's off the grid, someone who has nothing to lose." "I have Nora." "Yes, which means you have everything to lose." Celine's voice softened slightly. "I'm sorry, that was poorly phrased. What I meant is that you're not connected to the industry anymore. You're not on anyone's radar. That makes you safe." "Safe for what?" She glanced toward the office where Patterson was pretending not to watch. "Not here. Can you meet me tonight, after your daughter's asleep?" "Absolutely not." "Mr. Hayes, I don't know you. I don't know what you're involved in, and I sure as hell don't meet strange women in the middle of the night." Caleb crossed his arms. "If you need your wheel bearing fixed, I can do that. If you need something else, find someone else." Celine studied him for a long moment. Then she nodded. "All right, fix the wheel bearing. But Mr. Hayes, when I come to pick up the car tomorrow, I'm going to ask you again, and I hope you'll reconsider." "I won't." "We'll see." She turned and walked toward the office to settle payment. Caleb stood there, hands still grease-stained, mind reeling. Patterson met him at the door. "What was that about?" "Wheel bearing." "Looked like more than a wheel bearing." "It's not." Caleb pushed past him. "I'll start on it after lunch." But for the rest of the day, as he worked through the remaining repairs, Caleb couldn't shake the feeling that his life had just tilted onto a new axis, one he hadn't asked for and didn't want. He picked up Nora from Mrs. Chen's at 6:30, already exhausted. Mrs. Chen, a widow in her 70s who watched Nora for $20 a day, which was all Caleb could afford, met him at the door with her usual concerned expression. "She didn't eat much dinner," Mrs. Chen said in her lilting accent. "I made chicken with rice, but she only picked at it." Caleb found Nora on the couch watching cartoons. "Hey, Peanut, you feeling okay?" "I'm fine." "Mrs. Chen says you didn't eat." "I wasn't hungry." Caleb crouched beside the couch, studying her face. She looked pale, with shadows under her eyes. "Bad day at school?" "School was fine." "Then what's wrong?" Nora's lower lip trembled. "I don't want to talk about it." I said I don't want to talk about it." She jumped up and ran to her room, slamming the door behind her. Caleb stood there, caught between following her and giving her space. Mrs. Chen touched his arm gently. "She'll tell you when she's ready," the old woman said. Children need time to process. You remember that, yes? Yeah, Caleb ran a hand through his hair. Thanks, Mrs. Chen. I'll get you for this week on Friday. No rush. You know I love that girl like my own granddaughter. After Mrs. Chen left, Caleb knocked softly on Nora's door. I'm making spaghetti, your favorite. I'm not hungry. You have to eat something, Peanut. Silence. Caleb sighed and headed to the kitchen. Their apartment was small, just 2 bedrooms and a bathroom, with a kitchen that opened into a living room barely large enough for a couch and TV. The walls needed paint. The carpet was stained. But it was home, and it was theirs, and most months he managed to keep the rent paid. He boiled water and browned ground beef while his mind churned through the day's events. Celine Ward. Her expensive car and careful words. The way she'd known things about him that she had no business knowing. I need help. With what? And why him? He was nobody. Just a washed-up engineer working a dead-end job trying to keep his head above water long enough to get his daughter through childhood. The water boiled over, hissing on the stovetop. Caleb cursed and turned down the heat. Daddy? He turned to find Nora standing in the kitchen doorway, still in her school clothes, clutching Mr. Whiskers. Hey, you hungry now? She shook her head. Then quietly, Kayla Roberts said her mom says you're poor. Caleb's chest tightened. Did she now? She said that's why I wear old shoes and bring the same lunch every day. Nora's eyes were wet. She said her mom says you can't take care of me properly. Every protective instinct Caleb possessed roared to life. He wanted to march over to Kayla Roberts' house and have words with her mother. Loud words. But instead, he knelt down to Nora's level. Listen to me, Peanut. We don't have a lot of money. That's true. But that doesn't mean I can't take care of you. He brushed a strand of hair from her face. You have food every day, right? And a bed to sleep in? And clothes that keep you warm? But they're not new clothes. New doesn't matter. What matters is that you're safe and loved and healthy. He pulled her into a hug. I know it's hard when other kids have more stuff, but stuff isn't what makes a family. Love is. And you've got more love than any kid in that whole school. Nora sniffled against his shoulder. Promise? Promise. They ate spaghetti together on the couch, watching Nora's favorite cartoon. She fell asleep before it ended, her head on Caleb's lap, Mr. Whiskers clutched to her chest. Caleb sat there long after the credits rolled, one hand resting on his daughter's hair, mind spinning. Someone who has nothing to lose. Celine Ward didn't understand. Everything Caleb did, every choice he made, was about protecting Nora. About giving her the childhood Sarah would have wanted her to have. About being enough even when he knew, deep down, that he wasn't. He carried Nora to bed, tucking her in carefully so she wouldn't wake. Then he stood in her doorway, watching her sleep, and made a decision. Tomorrow, when Celine Ward came to pick up her car, he'd tell her no. Clearly. Finally. Whatever she was running from, whatever help she needed, it had nothing to do with him. He had enough problems of his own. But around 2 a.m, Caleb woke to the sound of a car idling outside his apartment. He went to the window and looked out. A black Mercedes sat at the curb, engine running, headlights off. Celine Ward sat in the driver's seat, looking up at his window. Their eyes met across the darkness, and Caleb knew, with a certainty that made his stomach drop, that saying no wasn't going to be enough. Whatever was coming, it was already here. Caleb stayed at the window for 30 seconds, maybe 40. The Mercedes didn't move. Neither did Celine. She just sat there, watching his apartment like she had all the time in the world. He let the curtain fall back into place and checked Nora's room. Still asleep, Mr. Whiskers tucked under her chin. He pulled her door mostly closed and grabbed his jacket from the hook by the door. The night air hit him like cold water. October in Oregon meant temperatures that dropped fast after sunset, the kind of chill that worked its way into your bones if you stood still too long. Caleb crossed the parking lot, gravel crunching under his work boots. Celine rolled down her window as he approached. You want to explain what the hell you're doing outside my apartment at 2 a.m? Caleb kept his voice low but couldn't keep the anger out of it. Making sure you're safe. Safe from what? That's what I've been trying to tell you. She opened the car door and stepped out. Up close, in the weak light from the apartment complex's single functioning street lamp, she looked tired. Not exhausted. Caleb knew exhausted, saw it in his own mirror every morning. This was different. This was the kind of tired that came from running too long without knowing where you were running to. Look, Caleb said, I don't know what kind of trouble you're in, but I can't help you. I've got a kid sleeping upstairs who depends on me. I can't afford to get involved in, he gestured vaguely at her, the car, the entire situation. Whatever this is, they know about you now. The words landed like a punch. What? I was careful. I thought I was careful. Celine's jaw tightened. But they have resources I didn't account for. By coming to your garage, by asking for you specifically, I made you visible. And now they're watching you. Who's watching me? The people I used to work for. And who are they? Celine glanced back at the Mercedes, then at the apartment building. Can we talk inside? I promise I'll explain everything, but not out here. Every instinct screamed at him to say no. To walk back upstairs, lock the door, pretend this conversation never happened. But the fear in her voice, carefully controlled, almost hidden, but there, made him hesitate. 5 minutes, he said finally. And you're staying in the living room where I can see you. She followed him up the exterior stairs to his second-floor unit. Inside, Caleb left most of the lights off, just clicked on the small lamp by the couch. Celine stood in the middle of the room, taking in the space with the same careful observation she'd applied to everything else. Nice place, she said, though they both knew it wasn't. You've got 4 minutes left. Celine sat on the edge of the couch, hands folded in her lap. 3 years ago, I was the chief financial officer of a company called Archon Industries. You've probably never heard of them. They operate mostly through subsidiaries and shell corporations. Defense contracts, private security, technology development. Sounds legitimate. On paper, yes. In practice? She shook her head. I started noticing discrepancies in the accounts about 18 months into my tenure. Money moving through channels that didn't make sense. Payments to contractors that didn't exist. When I started asking questions, I was told it was compartmentalized, that I didn't have clearance for certain operational details. Caleb crossed his arms. So you kept digging. I kept digging, and I found something I wasn't supposed to find. She met his eyes. Archon wasn't just moving money. They were building something, a network, using their defense contracts as cover to develop technology for clients who definitely weren't the U.S. government. What kind of technology? The kind that tracks people, monitors them, controls them. Her voice went flat. Autonomous weapons systems. Surveillance software that makes the NSA look like amateur hour. Biometric identification that can pick someone out of a crowd from a satellite image. Caleb's mouth went dry. And they knew you found out? I made the mistake of thinking I could expose them from the inside. I compiled evidence, built a case, went to the board of directors. She laughed, but there was no humor in it. Turns out half the board was in on it. The other half didn't want to know. Within 24 hours, I was out. They offered me a severance package and an NDA. Said if I signed, we could all walk away clean. But you didn't sign. I signed. Celine's hands tightened in her lap. I took their money and their threats. And I walked away because I was scared. I told myself it wasn't my problem anymore. That someone else would figure it out, blow the whistle, do the right thing. So what changed? 6 months ago, I saw a news report about a protest in Seattle, activists demonstrating against police militarization. The police used new crowd control technology, sonic weapons, they called them, non-lethal, precise. She looked up at him. I recognized the tech. It was Archon's, built using the research I'd helped fund, deployed against American citizens on American soil. Caleb sank into his chair across from her. Jesus. I tried to go to the press, anonymously at first, but Archon has contacts everywhere. Journalists, editors, government officials. Every outlet I approached either ignored me or the story mysteriously disappeared. She pulled something from her pocket, a small USB drive. So I went back. I hacked into their systems and pulled everything. Financial records, development files, client lists, deployment schedules. Enough to bring down the entire operation. And they've been looking for you ever since. They've been looking for this. She held up the drive. The information is encrypted, but Archon knows I have it. They can't risk me giving it to the wrong person. So why haven't they found you? Because I'm good at disappearing. I've been moving every few weeks, staying off grid, using cash only. She tucked the drive back into her pocket. But they're getting closer. That's why I need your help. Caleb stood up, pacing the small living room. You still haven't explained what any of this has to do with me. The encryption on the drive uses a dual key system. One key is biometric, my fingerprints, retinal scan, the works. The other is mechanical, a physical device that has to be present to unlock the files. She paused. The device is hidden inside a prototype electric vehicle, one that was designed at Titan Industries 4 years ago. Everything clicked into place. The Titan E7. You worked on it. I designed half the electrical systems. Caleb's mind raced back through the years. The E7 had been Titan's attempt to break into the luxury electric market, a high-end sedan with cutting-edge battery technology and integrated smart systems. But the project had been scrapped before it reached production. The E7 never made it to market. Titan killed the program after he stopped, after Sarah died, after he'd fallen apart and stopped showing up to work and let everything he'd built collapse around him. Titan sold the prototype to a private collector, Celine continued. Someone with connections to Archon. I tracked it down 3 months ago and modified it. The encryption key is hidden in the vehicle's main computer system, disguised as diagnostic code. Where's the car now? Portland. Locked in a private garage. She leaned forward. I need someone who can access the vehicle's systems without triggering any alarms. Someone who knows the E7's architecture well enough to navigate it blind. And someone Archon won't see coming. So you picked me because I'm nobody. I picked you because you're skilled. You're off their radar. And according to everything I could find about you, you're someone who tries to do the right thing even when it costs you. Caleb laughed bitterly. You don't know anything about me. I know you walked away from a 6-figure job to take care of your daughter. I know you've been blackballed from the industry because you refused to sign an NDA after your wife's death. Something about safety violations at Titan that you wanted investigated. Her eyes softened slightly. I know you're drowning in debt and working a job that pays half what you're worth because it's the only one that lets you pick your daughter up from school every day. Stop. I know you're a good man, Mr. Hayes. That's why I'm here. Then you wasted your time. Caleb moved toward the door. I'm sorry about what happened to you. I'm sorry you got caught up in something this big, but I can't help you. I've got Nora to think about. And what happens when Archon decides you're a loose end? The question stopped him cold. What? They know I came to your garage. They know we talked. They don't know what I told you, but they'll assume the worst. Celine stood. Right now, you're on their list. Maybe not at the top, but you're there. And if they ever decide you're a threat, if they think I gave you the drive or told you where the car is, they won't hesitate. You're saying they'd come after me. I'm saying they'd come after anyone they see as a risk. And you have a daughter, Mr. Hayes, a daughter who depends on you. What happens to her if you're gone? Rage flooded through him, hot and sudden. Don't you dare use Nora to manipulate me. I'm not manipulating you. I'm telling you the reality of the situation. Celine's voice stayed calm, which somehow made it worse. You're involved now whether you want to be or not. The only question is whether you're going to help me end this or wait around to see what Archon does next. Get out! Mr. Hayes, I said, get out! The words came out louder than he intended. He checked himself, lowering his voice to a harsh whisper. You came here in the middle of the night, told me some story about corporate conspiracies and surveillance networks, and now you're threatening my daughter. I don't care what you think you know about me. I want you gone. Celine looked at him for a long moment, something like regret flickering across her face. Then she nodded and moved toward the door. I'm staying at the Riverside Motor Lodge, she said. Room 12. If you change your mind, I won't. She left without another word. Caleb stood in the middle of his living room, hands shaking, trying to process what had just happened. A sound from the hallway made him turn. Nora stood in her doorway, Mr. Whiskers dangling from one hand. Daddy? Who was that lady? Caleb's heart sank. Nobody, Peanut. Just someone from work. Go back to bed. You sounded mad. I'm not mad. Just tired. He walked over and guided her gently back toward her room. Come on. School in the morning. Nora climbed into bed but looked up at him with those 2 knowing eyes. Is something wrong? Nothing's wrong, I promise. You're doing the eyebrow thing again. Despite everything, Caleb almost smiled. Yeah, I know. He sat on the edge of her bed until she fell back asleep, then returned to the living room and stood at the window. The Mercedes was gone. The parking lot was empty except for the usual cars. Caleb tried to tell himself that was the end of it. Celine would leave town, take her conspiracies and her USB drive somewhere else, find someone else to help her. He'd never hear from her again. But he couldn't shake the image of her sitting in that car at 2 a.m, watching his apartment, making sure he was safe. Or maybe making sure he didn't run. The next morning arrived too quickly. Caleb made breakfast, scrambled eggs and toast that Nora picked at without enthusiasm, and got her to school on time despite his lack of sleep. Patterson was waiting when he arrived at the garage. "You look like hell," Patterson said by way of greeting. "Rough night." "Yeah, well, you've got a problem." Patterson jerked his thumb toward Bay 3. "Your friend with the Mercedes came back." Caleb's stomach dropped. "She's here?" "No, genius. She dropped the car off at 6 this morning with a note saying she needs additional work done. Wouldn't tell me what kind of work. Said you'd know." Patterson's eyes narrowed. "So what's going on, Hayes? You running some kind of side business I should know about?" "It's nothing like that." "Then what's it like? Because from where I'm standing, you've got a mysterious woman showing up at odd hours asking for special treatment, and now she's leaving cars overnight like this is her personal garage." Caleb rubbed his face. "Just let me handle it, okay? I'll take care of the car and get it out of here." "You're damn right you will. And Hayes, whatever this is, it ends today. I've got a business to run." Caleb found the Mercedes exactly where Patterson said it would be. The keys were on the workbench with a note written in precise handwriting. "Please check the transmission fluid and reconsider. SW." He crumpled the note and shoved it in his pocket. The transmission fluid was fine. The whole car was fine. He'd already fixed the wheel bearing yesterday. This was just Celine's way of forcing another conversation. Caleb should have refused. Should have had Patterson call her and tell her to pick up the car. But instead, he found himself pulling out his phone and searching for the Riverside Motor Lodge. He called during his lunch break. "Room 12, please." The phone rang 4 times before Celine answered. "Mr. Hayes, how'd you know it was me?" "Who else would call this room?" She sounded tired. "Did you get my note? Your transmission fluid is fine. Your whole car is fine. Stop making up problems." "I'll stop when you agree to help me." Caleb glanced around the garage. Tommy was working on the other side of the bay, out of earshot, but he still lowered his voice. "You need to leave town, today. Whatever game you're playing, this isn't a game." "Then what is it? Because from where I'm standing, you're either paranoid or you're trying to con me into something." "Come to my motel room tonight, after your daughter's asleep. I'll show you proof." "I'm not coming to your motel room." "Then meet me somewhere public, a restaurant, a coffee shop, wherever you feel safe." Her voice took on an edge of desperation. "Please, Mr. Hayes, give me 1 hour. If you still think I'm lying after that, I'll leave Riverside and you'll never hear from me again." Caleb closed his eyes. Every rational part of his brain was screaming at him to hang up, to wash his hands of this entire situation. But there was something in Celine's voice. Not just fear he could dismiss as someone else's problem. This was something deeper, a kind of exhaustion that came from carrying a weight too heavy to bear alone. He knew that feeling intimately. 1 hour, he heard himself say. "Tomorrow night, the diner on 5th Street, 7 o'clock. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. And Celine, if this is a setup, if you're using me for something I don't understand, I'll make sure everyone knows exactly where to find you." "Fair enough." He hung up before he could change his mind. The rest of the day passed in a blur of routine work and mounting anxiety. Caleb finished the oil changes and brake jobs on autopilot, his mind churning through possibilities. Maybe Celine was telling the truth. Maybe she really was running from some corporate conspiracy. Or maybe she was delusional, seeing threats that didn't exist. Either way, meeting her was a mistake, but he'd already committed to it. He picked up Nora at the usual time. Mrs. Chen reported that she'd eaten better today, which was something. They stopped at the grocery store on the way home. Caleb calculated every item carefully, making sure they stayed under $30, and made dinner together. Spaghetti again, because the meat sauce he'd made earlier in the week would stretch for one more meal. "Daddy?" Nora said between bites. "Yeah, Peanut?" Is the lady from last night going to come back? Caleb's fork stopped halfway to his mouth. What makes you ask that? Nora shrugged. You've been doing the eyebrow thing all day. You only do that when you're worried. I'm not worried? Then why's your eyebrow all scrunchy? He forced himself to relax his expression. Just work stuff. Is it about the lady? Nora, I heard you talking. You said something about your daughter. She looked down at her plate. That's me, right? I'm your daughter? Caleb's chest tightened. Of course you are. Then why was she talking about me? He set down his fork and reached across the small table to take Nora's hand. Listen to me. That lady has some problems she's trying to solve. She thought maybe I could help her, but I told her no, because you're the most important thing in my life. You understand? So she's not coming back? Probably not. Good. Nora pulled her hand away and twirled spaghetti onto her fork. I didn't like her. You didn't even meet her. I saw her through the window. She looked sad. Out of the mouths of 8-year-olds, Caleb filed that observation away and changed the subject to Nora's upcoming school project. Something about the solar system that required poster board they definitely couldn't afford right now. After dinner, after homework, after the bedtime routine that had become as automatic as breathing, Caleb sat on the couch and pulled out his phone. He typed Archon Industries into the search bar. The results were sparse. A generic corporate website that said almost nothing. A few mentions in trade publications about defense contracts. A LinkedIn page listing employees, but nothing about executive leadership. He tried Celine Ward. More nothing. A few Facebook profiles that weren't her. An old LinkedIn account that had been deactivated. It was like she'd scrubbed herself from the internet, or like someone else had scrubbed her. Caleb set the phone down and stared at the ceiling. Tomorrow night he'd meet her at the diner. He'd listen to whatever evidence she had, and then he'd tell her, clearly and finally, that he couldn't help her. That would be the end of it. He almost believed it. The next day crawled by. Caleb kept his phone close, half expecting Celine to call and cancel, but she didn't. By the time his shift ended, his nerves were wound tight enough to snap. He picked up Nora, made dinner, supervised homework. At 6:30, Mrs. Chen arrived to babysit. You have a date? The old woman asked with a knowing smile. Just meeting someone about a job opportunity. Mm-hmm. You look nervous for a job interview. I'm not nervous. Mrs. Chen patted his arm. It's okay to be nervous, Caleb. You're allowed to have a life outside of work and Nora. If only she knew. The diner on 5th Street was a relic from the 1960s. Red vinyl booths, checkerboard floor, a jukebox that hadn't worked since before Caleb was born. It was cheap, which meant Caleb could afford a coffee without feeling guilty. And public, which meant Celine couldn't try anything stupid. She was already there when he arrived, sitting in a booth near the back, nursing a cup of tea. She'd changed clothes, jeans and a dark blue sweater instead of yesterday's gray, but still had that careful, controlled posture. Caleb slid into the booth across from her. You're early. I didn't want you to think I wouldn't show. The thought crossed my mind. A waitress appeared, Linda, who'd worked at the diner for as long as Caleb could remember. Coffee, hun? Please. Anything to eat? Caleb glanced at the menu, even though he already knew he couldn't afford anything. Just coffee's fine. Linda refilled Celine's tea and left them alone. Celine reached into her bag and pulled out a tablet computer. She set it on the table between them. What's this? Proof. But she unlocked the tablet and turned it toward him. These are financial records from Archon Industries. Transactions dating back 3 years. Caleb scanned the screen. Rows of numbers, account codes, transaction dates. It looked legitimate, but he was an engineer, not an accountant. I don't know what I'm looking at. Here, Celine swiped to a different document. This is a contract between Archon and a company called Meridian Security Solutions. $50 million for the development of autonomous surveillance drones. So, defense contractors build drones all the time. Meridian Security Solutions doesn't exist. It's a shell company registered in the Cayman Islands. The money went in and disappeared. She swiped again. This is an invoice for consulting services paid to a man named Victor Reeves. $20 million. Who's Victor Reeves? A former CIA operative who now runs a private military company that operates in countries where the U.S. officially has no presence. Celine's jaw tightened. I have emails between Reeves and Archon's CEO discussing deployment schedules for technology that was supposedly still in development. I have shipping manifests showing equipment moving to conflict zones through unmarked cargo planes. She kept swiping, showing him document after document. Purchase orders for components that couldn't be traced. Payments to contractors with no digital footprint. Communications encrypted so heavily they'd clearly been trying to hide something. "This is all on that USB drive you showed me?" Caleb asked. "This is a fraction of what's on the drive. I have years of financial data, internal memos, development files for weapon systems that violate international law." She locked the tablet and set it down. Archon isn't just a defense contractor. They're building a private military force answerable to no one, and they're using American taxpayer money to do it. Caleb sat back, mind reeling. Even if all this is true, why not just release it? Put it online, send it to every news outlet you can find. Because the encryption requires both keys to unlock. Without access to the E7's computer system, the files are useless, and Archon knows that. They're not looking for me to kill me, Mr. Hayes. They're looking for me to force me to give them the location of the car. So move the car, hide it somewhere else. I can't. The encryption is tied to the vehicle's physical location. If the car moves more than 50 feet from its current position, the files automatically delete. She leaned forward. I built in a failsafe to protect the data, but it also means I can't access it without bringing the right equipment to that specific garage in Portland. And you need me to do what exactly? Come with me to Portland, access the E7's computer system. Help me extract the encryption key so I can unlock the files. Her voice was steady, but her eyes were almost pleading. One day, Mr. Hayes, that's all I'm asking. Help me get what I need and I'll take care of the rest. And if I say no, then I'll figure something else out. But it'll take time I don't have, and the longer I wait, the more likely Archon is to find me. To find you. She paused. To find anyone I've had contact with. The unspoken threat hung between them. Caleb wanted to believe she was exaggerating, that a company, even a corrupt one, wouldn't risk going after a random mechanic and his daughter, but the documents on that tablet looked real, and the fear in Celine's eyes definitely was. I need to think about it, Caleb said finally. How long? I don't know, a day, 2 days. I don't have 2 days. That's not my problem. Celine flinched like he'd slapped her. Then she nodded slowly and stood. You're right. It's not your problem. I'm sorry for dragging you into this, Mr. Hayes. I thought... She stopped. It doesn't matter what I thought. She left $40 on the table, enough to cover both their drinks and a generous tip, and walked out of the diner without looking back. Caleb sat there for a long time, staring at the money. Then he paid Linda, pocketed the change, and drove home. Mrs. Chen was watching TV when he got back. How was your interview? Fine. Nora asleep? Out like a light. The old woman gathered her things. Caleb, whatever you're dealing with, you don't have to do it alone. You know that, yes? I know. Thanks, Mrs. Chen. After she left, Caleb checked on Nora, still asleep, Mr. Whiskers tucked under her arm, and then sat in the dark living room, thinking. The smart thing was to walk away, to pretend this conversation never happened. Celine would leave town, Archon would chase her somewhere else, and he'd go back to his quiet life of debt and desperation. But Kayla Roberts' words kept echoing in his head. Her mom says, you can't take care of me properly. What if Celine was right? What if Archon decided he was a risk? He had no money for lawyers, no connections, no way to fight back against a company with unlimited resources. And Nora would be the one who paid the price. Caleb pulled out his phone and stared at it for a long time. Then he typed a message. What time do we leave for Portland? The response came less than a minute later. Tomorrow, 6 a.m. Thank you. Caleb set the phone down and dropped his head into his hands. He'd just agreed to something that would either save his daughter's future or destroy it completely. And he had no idea which. Caleb didn't sleep. He lay in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to the familiar sounds of the apartment settling around him. The refrigerator humming in the kitchen, the couple upstairs arguing in muffled voices, a car alarm going off 3 blocks away. At 4:30, he gave up pretending and got out of bed. The coffee maker gurgled to life while he stood at the kitchen window watching the parking lot. No black Mercedes, no mysterious surveillance, Just the same collection of beat-up sedans and pickup trucks that had been there yesterday. He told Mrs. Chen he needed her to watch Nora today, claiming an emergency repair job in Portland that would pay double overtime. She'd agreed without question, bless her. The lie had come easily, which bothered him more than he wanted to admit. Nora woke up at 5:45, earlier than usual. "Where are you going?" She stood in the kitchen doorway, squinting against the light, her hair sticking up in every direction. Portland. A job. Caleb poured himself coffee, then reconsidered and dumped half of it down the sink. His hands were already shaking. More caffeine wouldn't help. "When will you be back?" "Tonight. Late, probably." "Is it about the sad lady?" Caleb turned to look at her. "What?" "The lady from the other night. Is that who you're going to see?" There was no point lying. Nora had always been able to read him too well. "Yeah, she needs help with something." "What kind of help?" "The complicated kind." He crouched down to her level. "Listen, Peanut, I need you to be extra good for Mrs. Chen today, okay? No complaining about homework, no arguing about vegetables." "I never argue about vegetables." "You argued about broccoli for 20 minutes last week." That's because broccoli tastes like tiny trees, and tiny trees shouldn't be food." She wrapped her arms around his neck. "Be careful, Daddy." The words hit him harder than they should have. "I will. I promise." "You're doing the eyebrow thing." "I know." Celine's Mercedes pulled into the parking lot at exactly 6 o'clock. Caleb kissed Nora goodbye, grabbed his jacket, and headed downstairs before he could change his mind. Celine was waiting behind the wheel, wearing dark jeans and a black jacket. She looked like she'd slept about as well as he had. "Morning," she said as he climbed into the passenger seat. "Yeah." She pulled out of the parking lot without another word. They drove through Riverside in silence, past the closed storefronts and empty streets, past the edge of town where the buildings gave way to fields and forest. The sun was just starting to rise, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that Caleb might have appreciated if his stomach wasn't twisted into knots. "Thank you for doing this," Celine said after they'd been on the highway for 20 minutes. "Don't thank me yet. I still don't know if I believe you." "Fair enough." "That tablet you showed me, those documents, how do I know they're real?" "You don't, not until we access the full files from the E7. She kept her eyes on the road. "But ask yourself this. If I was lying, why would I go to such elaborate lengths? Why not just rob you, or con you out of money, or any number of simpler schemes?" "Maybe you're crazy." "Maybe I am." A ghost of a smile crossed her face. "Would that make you feel better?" "Honestly, yeah. Crazy I can handle. Corporate conspiracy is a little out of my depth." They lapsed back into silence. Caleb watched the landscape blur past. Endless trees broken up by the occasional town or gas station. Portland was 2 hours away. 2 hours there, however long it took to access the car, 2 hours back. He'd be home by dinner if everything went smoothly. Nothing about this situation suggested things would go smoothly. "Tell me about the E7, Celine said. "What was it like working on it?" "Why?" "Because I need to know what we're dealing with, and because we have time to kill." Caleb considered refusing, then decided it didn't matter. The E7 was supposed to be Titan's flagship vehicle, full electric luxury market, designed to compete with Tesla and Mercedes. I was on the team that developed the integrated computer systems, everything from battery management to the infotainment console. What made it special? The architecture mostly. Instead of having separate systems for different functions, we built everything into a central processing unit, one computer controlling the whole vehicle. It was cutting edge at the time. He stared out the window. Probably still is. And it never went to production? The project was killed about 6 months before scheduled rollout. Titan's board decided the market wasn't ready, or the costs were too high, or some other corporate excuse. They built 3 prototypes and scrapped the rest. What happened to the prototypes? One went to a testing facility. One got torn down for parts. The third was supposed to go to a museum, but I guess someone bought it instead. He looked at her. "How'd you track it down?" "I have access to Archon's acquisition records. They purchased the E7 through a subsidiary company 18 months ago. I don't think they knew what they were buying. It was part of a bulk purchase of prototype vehicles and equipment. Just happened to be in the right place at the right time. Lucky you. Yeah. Her hands tightened on the steering wheel. Lucky me. They stopped for gas outside Salem. Caleb offered to pay, but Celine waved him off, using cash from a thick envelope she pulled from the center console. While she filled the tank, he went inside to use the bathroom and grab a coffee he didn't need. The TV behind the counter was playing morning news. A perky anchor was talking about a technology conference in Seattle, something about innovations in artificial intelligence and machine learning. Caleb barely registered the words until a logo flashed on screen. Archon Industries. He froze, coffee halfway to his mouth. Announcing a major partnership with the Department of Defense, the anchor was saying. Archon CEO Marcus Thorne stated that this collaboration will bring cutting-edge security solutions to military operations worldwide. The screen cut to a man in his 50s standing at a podium. Marcus Thorne was handsome in that calculated way rich people often were. Silver hair, expensive suit, smile that never quite reached his eyes. We're proud to support our nation's defense infrastructure, Thorne said smoothly. Archon has always been committed to innovation that protects American interests both at home and abroad. The report cut to footage of soldiers using what looked like advanced surveillance equipment. Then back to the anchor, who moved on to a story about a local bakery. Caleb set down his coffee and walked out. Celine was replacing the gas cap. "You okay?" she asked. "You look pale." "I just saw Archon on the news, your old boss." Something flickered across her face. Marcus Thorne. What was he saying? Something about a new partnership with the Department of Defense. He looked pretty pleased with himself. "I bet he did." Celine slammed the gas cap into place harder than necessary. Marcus has been angling for that contract for years, probably paid off half of Congress to get it. "You worked directly for him?" "I reported to him, yes. He hired me personally, actually. Said he needed someone with integrity to manage Archon's finances." She laughed bitterly. Turns out he just needed someone naive enough not to ask questions until it was too late. They got back in the car and merged onto the highway. Caleb couldn't stop thinking about Marcus Thorne's smile, the confidence of someone who believed he was untouchable. "When you expose all this," Caleb said, "what do you think happens to him?" "Prison, if there's any justice in the world. But probably just a slap on the wrist and early retirement. Men like Marcus always land on their feet." "Then why bother?" Celine was quiet for a long moment. "Because someone has to try. Because if I don't, then everything I've done, everything I've sacrificed, means nothing." She glanced at him. "You think I'm being naive? I think you're being optimistic. There's a difference." "What would you do in my position?" Caleb considered the question. "Honestly, I don't know. Probably run as far and fast as I could." "You say that, but I don't believe you." "Why not?" "Because you walked away from a comfortable job to take care of your daughter. Because you're working yourself to death at a garage that underpays you rather than compromise your principles." She switched lanes to pass a semi. "You're here right now, helping me, even though every rational part of your brain is telling you not to. That's not the behavior of someone who runs." "Maybe I'm just stupid." "Maybe. Or maybe you're brave and don't want to admit it." Caleb didn't have an answer for that, so he changed the subject. "Tell me about the garage, where we're going." "It's a private storage facility in the industrial district. The owner's a man named Chen Liu, no relation to your Mrs. Chen, I assume. He rents spaces to collectors and enthusiasts. Very discreet, very secure." Celine took the exit for Portland. "I've been paying him in cash for the past 3 months. As far as he knows, I'm just another rich person storing a toy I don't drive." "Will he be there today?" "No, he only comes in by appointment. I have my own key." They navigated through Portland's downtown traffic, eventually turning into an industrial area that looked like it had seen better days. Warehouses with broken windows. Empty lots full of weeds, a scrapyard guarded by chain-link fence and barbed wire. The storage facility was tucked between a lumber yard and an abandoned factory. From the outside, it looked like just another warehouse. Plain concrete walls, rolling metal doors, no signage. Celine pulled around to the back and parked. "We're here." Caleb climbed out and looked around. The area was deserted. No other cars, no people. Nothing but the sound of traffic from the nearby highway. "You're sure this place is secure?" he asked. "As sure as I can and I be." Celine unlocked a side door with a key from her pocket. "Stay close." The interior was dim, lit only by a few high windows and emergency lights. Rows of storage units stretched into the darkness, each sealed with a rolling metal door. Their footsteps echoed on the concrete floor. Celine led him to Unit 47, near the back corner. She produced another key and unlocked the door, then pulled it up with a metallic screech that made Caleb wince. Inside was the E7. Caleb hadn't seen one in 4 years, not since the project was canceled. But there it was, sleek and futuristic even by today's standards, painted a deep midnight blue that seemed to absorb the light. The lines were smooth and aggressive, the kind of design that suggested speed even when standing still. "Beautiful, isn't it?" Celine's voice was soft. "Yeah." Caleb approached slowly, running his hand along the hood. Hard to believe Titan just let this go. Their loss. Celine moved to the driver's side and opened the door. The main computer is accessed through the dashboard. You'll need to remove the center console panel to get to the diagnostic port. Caleb circled to the passenger side and climbed in. The interior was pristine, leather seats, carbon fiber trim, a digital dashboard that had been revolutionary when they designed it. He pulled a multi-tool from his pocket and started removing screws from the console panel. "How long will this take?" Celine asked. "Depends on what I find. Could be 20 minutes, could be 2 hours. He worked the panel free and set it aside. "Tell me exactly what I'm looking for." "A string of code embedded in the diagnostic system. It'll be disguised as a software version number, something like SYS.C.O.R.E.4.7.2.B.W. ARD.ENCRYPT. The last part is my identifier." Caleb pulled out the laptop Celine had given him, a ruggedized model with specialized software already loaded. He connected it to the E7's diagnostic port and waited for the system to boot up. The laptop screen filled with code, thousands of lines of system diagnostics, error logs, performance data. Caleb started filtering through it, searching for anything that matched Celine's description. "This is going to take a while," he muttered. "Take your time. We're not in a rush." But they were. Caleb could feel it, a pressure building at the base of his skull, instinct telling him they were exposed here. Vulnerable. He pushed the feeling aside and focused on the screen. Line after line of code scrolled past. Most of it was standard diagnostic information, the kind of thing he'd seen 1,000 times before. But occasionally he'd spot something unusual, a string of characters that didn't quite fit, a subroutine that seemed out of place. 20 minutes passed, then 30. "Got something," Caleb said. "Here, SYS.C.O.R.E.4.7.2.B.W.A.R.D.ENCRYPT. That it?" Celine leaned over his shoulder. "That's it. Can you access it?" Caleb highlighted the code and ran a trace program. The laptop churned for several seconds, then displayed a prompt asking for biometric verification. "Your turn," he said. Celine pulled the USB drive from her pocket and plugged it into the laptop. A scanner window appeared on screen. She pressed her thumb against the laptop's fingerprint reader. The screen flickered. New code appeared, this time organized into folders and files. Thousands of documents, spreadsheets, emails, video files. "We're in," Celine breathed. "We're actually in." Caleb watched as she navigated through the folders, spot-checking files to make sure they were intact. Her hands were shaking slightly. "How long to copy everything?" he asked. "Give me 5 minutes." She worked quickly, transferring files from the E7's computer to the USB drive. Caleb climbed out of the car and paced the storage unit, his nerves getting worse by the second. Something felt wrong. The way the door was positioned, the angle of the light coming through. He couldn't put his finger on it, but years of fixing cars had taught him to trust his gut when something was off. "Celine," he said quietly, "we need to hurry." "Almost done. Just a few more." The sound of an engine cut through the air, not from the highway, close. Caleb's blood went cold. "Someone's here." Celine yanked the USB drive from the laptop and shoved it in her pocket. How many? I don't know. Caleb moved to the storage unit door and peered out. 2 black SUVs were pulling up to the facility's entrance. Men in dark suits climbing out. 4, maybe 5. Damn it. Celine slammed the car door and started pulling down the storage unit's rolling door. They found us. How? You said this place was secure. I thought it was. They must have been tracking my movements, waiting for me to lead them here. The door crashed down, plunging them into near darkness, broken only by the emergency light above. Is there another way out? Caleb looked around desperately. The storage unit was a concrete box. No windows, no back door, nothing but the main entrance they'd just sealed. They were trapped. Listen to me, Celine said, her voice steady despite the situation. When they come through that door, I need you to run. Don't stop. Don't look back. Get to your car and drive straight to the police. What about you? I'll handle this. Celine, I got you into this. I'm getting you out. She pulled something from her jacket, a small handgun that looked like it had never been fired. I'm not letting anyone hurt you because of my mistakes. Footsteps echoed outside the storage unit, voices low and professional. I'm not leaving you, Caleb said. You have a daughter who needs you. And you have information that could bring down an entire company. We're both getting out of here. The footsteps stopped right outside the door. Then a voice, amplified and cold. Ms. Ward, we know you're in there. Come out peacefully and we can resolve this without anyone getting hurt. Celine and Caleb looked at each other in the dim light. Any ideas? She whispered. Caleb's mind raced. The E7 was still running, its electric motor silent but systems active. The storage unit was maybe 30 feet deep, 40 wide. The rolling door was steel but not reinforced. An idea formed, probably a terrible one, but it was better than surrendering. Get in the car, he said. What? Get in the car, driver's seat, start it up. Caleb, what are you? Just trust me. Celine climbed into the E7 while Caleb moved to the front of the vehicle. He felt along the frame, found the tow hook mounting point, then looked around the storage unit for anything he could use. There, in the corner, a length of chain probably left over from someone moving equipment. He grabbed it and hooked one end to the E7's front tow point. The other end he looped around one of the storage unit's support beams near the rolling door. When I say go, he called to Celine, put it in reverse and floor it. You want me to drive through the door? I want you to rip the door off its track. The chain should pull it down. Should? You got a better idea? The voice outside spoke again. Ms. Ward, this is your last warning. Come out now or we're coming in. Caleb climbed into the passenger seat and slammed the door. Go! Celine threw the E7 into reverse and hit the accelerator. The car shot backward. The chain went taut with a metallic shriek. For a second, nothing happened. Then the rolling door tore free from its track with a sound like a bomb going off. Metal screamed. The support beam groaned but held. The entire door crashed down onto the men standing outside. Celine didn't wait to see the result. She shifted into drive and gunned it, the E7 leaping forward over the fallen door and into the warehouse beyond. Men were scattering, diving for cover. One of them reached for a weapon, but Celine was already past him, tires screeching on concrete as she aimed for the side door they'd entered through. The E7 hit the door at 40 miles per hour. It was designed to take impacts, its frame reinforced, its structure optimized for crash protection. The door never had a chance. They burst into daylight. Celine cranked the wheel hard, barely missing a parked SUV, and accelerated toward the exit. Gunfire erupted behind them. Caleb ducked instinctively, but the E7's rear window was bulletproof. He'd insisted on it during development, never imagining he'd be grateful for it like this. The bullets hit with sharp cracks but didn't penetrate. Hold on! Celine whipped the car around a corner, then another, putting distance between them and the warehouse. Caleb looked back through the rear window. The SUVs were following, but the E7 was faster. Celine drove like someone who'd had training, smooth, controlled, taking corners at speeds that should have been impossible. Where are we going? Caleb shouted over the engine noise. Away from here. Then we figure out next steps. They merged onto the highway, weaving through traffic. The SUVs fell behind, unable to keep pace. After 10 minutes, Celine took an exit into a residential area and pulled into an empty parking garage. She killed the engine. They sat there in silence, both breathing hard. "You okay?" Celine asked finally. "No, I'm really not." Caleb's hands were shaking. Those were real guns, real bullets." "I know. I'm sorry." "Stop apologizing." He looked at her. "How did they find us?" "I don't know. I was so careful." She pulled out her phone and stared at it. She powered the phone down and removed the battery, then threw it out the window. "What are you doing?" "They could have been tracking my phone. I should have thought of that sooner." She started removing the back panel, looking for anything that shouldn't be there. "We need to ditch this car too. They'll have the plates. We're in Portland with no transportation and people hunting us. Brilliant plan. You have any better suggestions?" Caleb closed his eyes and forced himself to think. They needed to get back to Riverside, but taking Celine's Mercedes was suicide. They could rent a car, but that required ID and credit cards, both traceable. Public transportation was too slow and too public. "My car," he said. "It's still at the warehouse. We can't go back there." "We don't have to. I have a spare key hidden in the bumper. We just need to get close enough for me to grab it. They'll be watching for us." So we wait until dark. Find somewhere to lay low for a few hours. He looked at her. "Unless you've got the files you need, maybe we can go straight to the press." Celine pulled out the USB drive and checked it. Her face fell. "It's corrupted. The transfer didn't complete before we had to run." "So we got nothing." "We got about 40% of the files. Enough to cause problems for Archon, but not enough to bring them down." She slumped in her seat. "We're going to have to try again." "Are you insane? They know about that warehouse now. They'll be waiting." "Then we find another way." "But I'm not giving up, Caleb. Not when we're this close." Caleb wanted to argue, wanted to tell her she was going to get them both killed. But the determination in her eyes reminded him of Sarah, the same stubborn refusal to back down when she believed in something. "Fine," he said. "But first we get out of Portland, get somewhere safe. Then we figure out what's next." Celine nodded. "There's a diner about 6 blocks from here. We can walk there, blend in, wait for nightfall." They abandoned the E7 in the parking garage and started walking. Caleb kept his head down, hyper-aware of every car that passed, every person they encountered. His phone buzzed in his pocket. Mrs. Chen. He'd forgotten to call her. "Hey," he said, trying to sound normal. "Everything okay?" "Everything's fine. Nora's at school. I just wanted to check on you. You said you'd be back by dinner?" "Yeah, maybe a little later. The job's taking longer than expected." "No problem. I'll make her something to eat if you're late." "Thanks. I really appreciate it." He hung up and immediately felt sick. What was he doing? He should be home with Nora, not running from armed men in Portland with a woman he barely knew, but it was too late to turn back now. They reached the diner and slid into a booth near the back. A tired-looking waitress took their order, coffee for both of them, eggs and toast for Caleb because he realized he hadn't eaten since yesterday. "Tell me about your daughter," Celine said quietly. "Why?" "Because I need to think about something other than the fact that I almost got us killed." She wrapped her hands around her coffee mug. "And because I want to know more about the person who's risking everything to help me." Caleb picked at his eggs. "Her name's Nora. She's 8. Smart as hell. Sees right through every lie I try to tell her. She sounds like her father. She's better than me. Braver. More hopeful." He smiled despite everything. "She still believes people are fundamentally good, that things will work out if you try hard enough." "You don't believe that?" "I did once, before Sarah died, before I learned that trying hard doesn't always matter." Celine was quiet for a moment. "How did she die? If you don't mind me asking." But Caleb hadn't talked about it in years. But sitting in this anonymous diner, running from people who wanted to kill them, it somehow felt easier to say the words out loud. "Car accident. Some jackass ran a red light and T-boned her at an intersection. She was gone before the ambulance arrived." He stared into his coffee. "The worst part is, it was preventable. The intersection had been flagged for safety improvements, better signals, clearer markings. But the city kept pushing it back. saying they didn't have the budget. So Sarah died because someone decided traffic lights weren't worth the money. I'm sorry. Yeah, everyone's sorry. Doesn't change anything. He pushed his plate away. That's when I found out Titan had known about safety issues in their vehicles for years but buried the reports. Sarah was driving a Titan sedan. The crash test ratings were fraudulent. If she'd been in literally any other car, she might have survived. That's why you left. That's why I tried to blow the whistle. But Titan has lawyers and money and friends in all the right places. They offered me a settlement if I'd sign an NDA and go away quietly. He laughed bitterly. I told them to shove their settlement. Got blackballed from the industry as a result. Now I change oil for Patterson and try not to think about what might have been. Celine reached across the table and put her hand over his. For what it's worth, I think you made the right choice. Yeah? Look where the right choice got me. Working a job I hate, drowning in debt, dragging my daughter through a childhood she deserves better than. But you have your integrity, and Nora has a father who teaches her that some things matter more than money or comfort. She squeezed his hand. That's not nothing, Caleb. They sat like that for a while, hands touching across the table, two broken people trying to convince each other that doing the right thing still mattered. Outside the diner windows, Portland went about its business. People walking dogs, catching buses, living their normal lives. None of them had any idea what was happening in this corner booth. The quiet war being waged between truth and power. And for just a moment, Caleb let himself believe they might actually win. The afternoon stretched into evening. They stayed in the diner nursing refills of coffee that tasted worse with each cup, watching the light outside shift from gray to amber to the deep blue of approaching night. The waitress stopped asking if they needed anything else and just left them alone, probably figuring they were having relationship problems or waiting out bad news. She wasn't entirely wrong. Around 6, Caleb's phone buzzed again. Nora this time, calling from Mrs. Chen's landline. Hey, Peanut. Daddy, when are you coming home? Her voice was small, worried. Soon, I'm just finishing up here. Mrs. Chen made pot roast, but I'm not hungry. Caleb's chest tightened. Nora loved pot roast. You feeling okay? I just want you to come home. I know. I'll be there as soon as I can, I promise. He glanced at Celine, who was pretending not to listen. You being good for Mrs. Chen? Yes, Daddy. Yeah? Nothing. Just be careful. Always am? The lie felt heavier this time. Love you, Peanut. Love you too. He hung up and set the phone on the table harder than necessary. Celine was watching him with that careful expression she wore when she was trying to read him. She okay? Celine asked. She's worried. Kids pick up on things even when you think you're hiding it. Caleb rubbed his face. I should be there. Not here. Running from people with guns, chasing files that might not even matter. They matter. To you. To me, what matters is making sure my daughter doesn't end up in foster care because I got myself killed doing something stupid. Then we make sure that doesn't happen. Celine's voice was steady. We get your car, we drive back to Riverside, and tomorrow I figure out a new approach. One that doesn't put you in danger. There's no approach that doesn't put me in danger. Not anymore. Caleb leaned back in the booth. You said it yourself. They know about me. I'm on their list now, which is why we need to end this. Release the files I do have, get them to journalists who will actually publish them. Force Archon into the open where they can't operate in the shadows. She pulled out the USB drive and turned it over in her fingers. 40% isn't everything, but it's enough to start asking questions. Enough to make people look closer. And if it's not, if they bury the story like they've buried everything else, then at least I tried. At least I didn't give up. Caleb wanted to argue, but he recognized the look in her eyes. The same stubborn determination that had gotten him blackballed from the automotive industry. The refusal to let injustice slide just because fighting it was hard. Maybe they were more alike than he'd realized. By 7:30, the sky was fully dark. They paid their bill, Celine leaving another generous tip, and stepped out into the October cold. The walk back to the warehouse district took 30 minutes, both of them staying in the shadows, avoiding main streets. The industrial area was quieter now, a few security lights illuminating loading docks, but otherwise just darkness and the distant hum of the highway. Caleb's Civic was still in the lot where he'd left it that morning, untouched. The storage facility's entrance was blocked by police tape and a single patrol car, but the cops weren't actively watching the lot. "Stay here," Caleb whispered to Celine. "I'll get the key and bring the car around. Be careful." He approached the Civic from the far side, using parked trucks for cover. His fingers found the magnetic key box he'd hidden in the rear wheel well months ago, a habit from when he used to lock his keys in the car with embarrassing frequency. The spare key was still there. He unlocked the driver's door as quietly as possible and climbed in. The Civic's engine turned over with its usual reluctant cough, loud enough that Caleb's heart rate spiked. He waited for shouts, for flashlights, for any indication someone had heard. Nothing. He pulled out of the lot slowly, headlights off until he reached the street. Celine was waiting where he'd left her, pressed against a building's wall. She slipped into the passenger seat and he drove away, keeping to the speed limit, trying to look like just another commuter heading home. They were 3 blocks away when Celine said, "We're being followed." Caleb checked the rearview mirror. A dark sedan, 2 cars back, matching their speed exactly. "You sure?" "I've been watching it since we left. It's made every turn we have." "Could be coincidence." "Could be. But I don't believe in coincidences anymore." Caleb's hands tightened on the wheel. "What do we do?" "Take the next right. Let's see if they follow." He turned. The sedan turned. Caleb's pulse hammered in his ears. "They're not even trying to be subtle," he said. "They don't need to be. They know we're trapped." Celine looked back through the rear window. "Can this car outrun them?" "Not a chance. The transmission's half dead and I haven't changed the oil in 6,000 miles. He scanned the street ahead, looking for options. "We need to lose them in traffic or find somewhere to hide. There's a mall coming up on the left, big parking structure. If we can get inside, we might be able to lose them in the levels." Caleb saw the mall's lights ahead, one of those dying retail centers with more empty storefronts than operating businesses. The parking structure looked half full at most. He accelerated slightly, putting distance between them and the sedan, then whipped into the parking entrance. The Civic's tires squealed as he took the turns too fast, spiraling up through the levels. 2nd floor, 3rd floor, 4th. He picked a spot between a panel van and an SUV, killed the engine, and they both ducked down. Headlights swept across the level. The sedan cruising slowly, searching. Caleb held his breath. The Civic's engine ticked as it cooled. Celine was pressed against her door, watching through the gap between the seats. The sedan passed their row, kept going, disappeared around the corner. They waited. 5 minutes. 10. No sound of the engine returning. "Think we lost them?" Caleb whispered. "Maybe. Or maybe they're calling in backup." Celine slowly sat up. "We should keep moving." "To where? They know what my car looks like now." "Then we ditch it. Find another way back to Riverside." "With what money? I've got maybe $40 in my wallet." Celine pulled out the envelope of cash from earlier. It was significantly thinner now, but still had several $100s. "This should be enough for bus tickets. Buses don't run to Riverside at this hour. We'd have to wait until morning. So we find a motel, lay low for the night, figure out next steps when we're not exhausted and running on adrenaline." Caleb wanted to protest, but she was right. He'd been awake for almost 20 hours straight, and his ability to think clearly was deteriorating fast. They needed rest. They needed a plan. They needed a miracle. They abandoned the Civic in the parking structure and caught a bus downtown. The other passengers were the usual mix of night workers and people with nowhere else to go. Nobody paid attention to the tired man and the watchful woman sitting in the back. Celine found a motel 3 blocks from the bus station, the kind of place that rented by the hour and didn't ask for ID if you paid cash. The clerk barely looked at them as he handed over a key to room 8. The room was exactly what Caleb expected. Stained carpet, cigarette burns on the furniture, a smell that suggested the last guests hadn't been tourists. But it had locks on the door and the bed looked relatively clean. "You take the bed," Celine said, dropping onto the room's single chair. "I'll keep watch." "You need sleep too." "I need you functional more than I need rest. You're driving tomorrow." "In what car?" "We'll figure it out." She pulled the USB drive from her pocket and plugged it into her laptop. "Right now I need to see exactly what we got from the E7. Assess what we're working with." Caleb sat on the edge of the bed and watched her work. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, opening files, scanning documents, cross-referencing information. The laptop screen reflected in her eyes, rows of numbers and text that meant nothing to him but clearly meant everything to her. "It's worse than I thought," she said after 20 minutes. "How much worse?" "I got most of the financial records, but almost none of the technical documentation. No development files, no deployment schedules, no client lists." She closed the laptop harder than necessary. "I can prove Archon moved money illegally, but I can't prove what they built with it. Any halfway competent lawyer will argue the payments were legitimate, and we just don't understand the paperwork. So we've got nothing. We've got something, just not enough." She looked at him. "I need to go back." "Back where?" "To the warehouse. To the E7. I need the rest of those files." "Are you out of your mind? They're watching that place. Probably have it under surveillance 24/7 now. Which is why I need to be smart about it. Plan it properly this time instead of rushing in." She stood and started pacing the small room. "There's a service entrance on the east side of the building. If I can get in through there, avoid the main floor entirely." "Celine, stop." Caleb grabbed her arm gently. "You're not thinking clearly. You're exhausted and scared, and you're making desperate plans that'll get you killed." "I don't have the luxury of not being desperate." She pulled away from him. "Every day that passes is another day Archon uses their technology to hurt people. Another day Marcus Thorne smiles for cameras while selling weapons to the highest bidder. I can't just sit here and accept that." "I'm not asking you to accept it. I'm asking you to think." He moved to stand in front of her, forcing her to meet his eyes. "You told me you're good at disappearing, so disappear. Take the files you have and go underground. Send them to every journalist and whistleblower organization you can find. Let other people carry the fight while you stay safe." "Other people won't care, not the way I do. Not enough to risk everything." "You're right. They won't. Because most people have something to lose." Caleb's voice softened. "But you're not most people. You're someone who walked away from a fortune because you couldn't live with yourself. Someone who spent months gathering evidence when you could have just run. Someone who—" He stopped. Celine was crying. Silent tears running down her face, her carefully controlled composure finally cracking. "I'm so tired," she whispered. "I'm tired of running, tired of looking over my shoulder, tired of being alone." Caleb pulled her into a hug without thinking about it. She tensed for a second, then collapsed against him, her whole body shaking with sobs she'd probably been holding in for months. "I know," he said into her hair. "I know you're tired." They stood like that for a long time. Two people who'd been carrying too much for too long, holding each other up in a motel room that smelled like failure and desperation. Eventually, Celine pulled back, wiping her eyes. "I'm sorry. That was unprofessional. We're way past professional at this point." She laughed weakly. "I suppose we are." She sat back down in the chair and pulled her knees to her chest. "When I worked at Archon, I used to think I was making a difference, that my job mattered. I'd go home at night and tell myself I was helping build something important. You didn't know what they were really doing. I should have. The signs were there, the questions I wasn't allowed to ask, the meetings I wasn't invited to. But I didn't want to see it, because seeing it would mean admitting I'd wasted 3 years of my life working for monsters." She rested her chin on her knees. "My mother always said I was too stubborn for my own good, that I'd rather break than bend. Stubborn's not always bad. It is when it gets other people hurt. You shouldn't be here, Caleb. You should be home with Nora, living your life. Not hiding in a motel because I dragged you into my mess. You didn't drag me. I chose to help." He sat down on the bed again. "And yeah, maybe it was a stupid choice. Maybe I should have sent you away the first time you showed up at the garage. But I didn't. Because something in me recognized something in you." "What?" "Someone who refuses to give up even when giving up is the smart play. Someone who'd rather fight and lose than walk away clean." He smiled tiredly. "We're both idiots, basically. That's one way to put it." They fell into a comfortable silence. Outside, Portland went about its evening business, cars passing, sirens in the distance, the ambient noise of a city that never fully slept. Inside room 8 of a cheap motel, two people who barely knew each other tried to figure out how to survive the night. "Tell me about your plan," Caleb said eventually. The one you're not going to do because it's too dangerous. I want to hear it anyway. Celine looked at him like she was trying to decide if he was serious. Then she opened her laptop again and pulled up a blueprint of the storage facility. The service entrance is here, she said, pointing. It's controlled by keycard access, but the system's old. I could bypass it with the right equipment. What kind of equipment? RFID cloner, basic lockpicks, maybe a signal jammer if they've upgraded their security since this morning. She traced a path through the blueprint. Once inside, I'd need to avoid the main floor where the E7 is stored. Too exposed. But there's a maintenance corridor that runs along the back wall. If I could access it, I might be able to reach Unit 47 from the rear. And then what? You spend an hour transferring files while hoping nobody notices? The transfer itself only takes about 10 minutes. The rest is getting in and out without being seen. She zoomed in on Unit 47. The real problem is the E7's computer. It has a proximity sensor. If someone approaches the vehicle without the proper key fob, it triggers an alert. So you need the key fob, which is in my Mercedes, which is probably in Archon's possession by now. She closed the laptop. It's a dead end. I can't get the files without the key, and I can't get the key without walking into a trap. Caleb stood and walked to the window, looking out at the parking lot. A thought was forming in his head, a terrible, risky thought that made his stomach turn. What if we don't go to the warehouse? He said slowly. What do you mean? The E7's computer system. I designed it. I know the architecture, the security protocols, all of it. He turned to face her. What if we could access it remotely? Celine sat up straighter. The E7 wasn't designed with remote access capabilities, not in the consumer model. No, but the development prototypes had diagnostic backdoors for testing, ways for engineers to access the system without physically being in the vehicle. He started pacing, the idea building momentum. We use them all the time during development. If those backdoors are still active, we could access the computer from anywhere. Exactly. We'd need the right credentials and a secure connection, but it's possible. He stopped pacing. Problem is, I don't have my old login credentials. Titan would have deactivated them years ago. But someone at Titan still has access. Someone in the engineering department. Yeah, but I'm not exactly on good terms with my former colleagues. The whole whistleblower thing didn't win me many friends. Celine was quiet for a moment, thinking. What about someone who left Titan around the same time you did? Someone who might have kept their credentials as insurance? Caleb's mind raced through names and faces. Most of his old team had stayed with the company, either unwilling to risk their careers or genuinely believing the safety violations weren't that serious. But there was one person who'd left under similarly bad circumstances. Angela Park, he said. She was a senior systems analyst. Quit about 6 months after I did when Titan tried to scapegoat her for a battery recall. Would she help us? I don't know. We weren't exactly friends, more like colleagues who respected each other's work. But she hated what Titan did to both of us. He pulled out his phone. I might still have her number. He did. Buried in his contacts, unchanged since the day he'd left Titan Industries. It's almost 10 at night, Celine said. Will she even answer? Only one way to find out. Caleb dialed. The phone rang 4 times and he was about to give up when a familiar voice answered. Hello? Angela, it's Caleb Hayes. A long pause. Then, well, that's a name I haven't heard in a while. How've you been, stranger? Honestly, I've had better weeks. I can imagine. I heard you were working at a garage in Riverside now, fixing cars instead of designing them. Something like that. Listen, Angela, I need a favor, a big one. Uh-oh, this sounds like trouble. It is, but it's important. He glanced at Celine, who nodded encouragement. You still have your old Titan credentials? The ones that give you backdoor access to prototype systems? Another pause. This one more cautious. Maybe. Why? I need to access the E7 prototype remotely, and I need to do it without Titan knowing. Caleb, what the hell are you mixed up in? I can't explain over the phone, but I promise you it's for a good reason, the kind of reason you'd approve of. He heard her sigh. You know I could lose my current job if this goes sideways, right? I'm working at a startup now, finally got my life back on track. I know, and I wouldn't ask if there was any other option. That bad, huh? Worse. Angela was quiet for so long that Caleb thought she might have hung up. Then, "All right, I'll help. But you owe me an explanation when this is over." "Deal." "Thank you, Angela. Really. Don't thank me yet. Just tell me what you need." Caleb spent the next 20 minutes walking Angela through the technical details while Celine set up her laptop. They'd need Angela's credentials to bypass Titan's security, plus a specific command string to activate the E7's dormant remote access protocols. It was complicated, time-sensitive, and had about a dozen ways it could fail catastrophically. But it was a chance. Their only one. "Okay," Angela said finally. "I'm sending you an encrypted file with my login credentials and the access codes. This link expires in 1 hour, so don't waste time. And Caleb, whatever you're doing, be careful. Titan doesn't forgive, and they definitely don't forget." "I know. Thanks again." He hung up and looked at Celine. "We've got 1 hour." "Then we better get started." They worked side by side, Celine handling the network connections while Caleb navigated the E7's computer system. It was strange, accessing something he'd helped build from a motel room hundreds of miles away. Like reconnecting with a part of his past he'd thought was dead. The backdoor protocols activated on the third try. Suddenly they were in, looking at the same diagnostic screens Caleb had seen that morning in the warehouse. The same folders, the same files, the same encrypted data. "Start the transfer," Caleb said. Celine's fingers flew across the keyboard. Progress bars appeared on screen, crawling from 0 toward 100%, 10%, 20%, 30%. "How long?" Caleb asked. "At this speed? 8 minutes? Maybe 9. 8 minutes. They could manage 8 minutes. 5% became 10. 20 became 30. The files were downloading, streaming through encrypted channels from the E7's computer to Celine's laptop. Everything they needed to expose Archon, to bring down Marcus Thorne, to make it all mean something. 50%. 60%. Caleb's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "We know what you're doing. Stop now or face consequences." His blood went cold. "Celine." She looked at the phone, then back at her laptop. 70%. "They're bluffing," she said. "They can't know." "They know. They're watching the E7's network activity." "Then we better finish fast." Her voice was steady, but her hands were shaking. 80%. Another text. "Last warning, Mr. Hayes. Think about your daughter." Rage flooded through him. "They're threatening Nora." "Caleb, we're almost done. 90%. "They're threatening my daughter." "I know. And the only way to keep her safe is to finish this, to get these files out into the world where Archon can't bury them." 95%. Caleb stood frozen, phone in hand, watching the progress bar inch toward completion. Every instinct screamed at him to stop, to shut down the laptop, to protect Nora at any cost. But Celine was right. Running wouldn't keep Nora safe. Hiding wouldn't work. The only way forward was through. 98%. 99. 100. "We got it," Celine breathed. "We got everything." She disconnected from the network and closed the laptop. Caleb immediately dialed Mrs. Chen, his heart hammering. She answered on the first ring. "Caleb, is Nora okay? Is she there with you?" "Of course she's here. She's asleep in the guest room." "Why, what's wrong?" "Nothing. I needed to make sure." He sat down heavily on the bed. "Thank you, Mrs. Chen. I'll be home soon." "You're scaring me, Caleb. What's happening?" "I'll explain when I get there. Just keep the doors locked, okay? Don't answer for anyone you don't know." He hung up before she could ask more questions. Celine was staring at him. "They know where you live," she said quietly. "Yeah. We need to get you home. Now." "How? We don't have a car. Buses won't run until morning." Celine pulled out her phone, a burner she'd bought at a convenience store earlier, and made a call. "I need a car delivered to the Starlight Motel on Morrison Street, room 8, within the hour." She paused. "I don't care what it costs. Just get it here." She hung up and started packing her laptop. "A friend from my old life. Owes me a favor. He'll come through. We're going back to Riverside tonight? We're going back right now. And then we're getting you and Nora somewhere safe while I release these files to every media outlet I can find." She looked at him, and for the first time since they'd met, Caleb saw real fear in her eyes. I'm sorry. I never should have brought you into this. Yeah, well, little late for apologies now. 40 minutes later, a nondescript Honda sedan pulled into the motel parking lot. The driver handed Celine the keys without a word and left in a different car that had been following him. They drove through the night, Celine pushing the Honda faster than was strictly legal, both of them watching the mirrors for any sign of pursuit. The highway stretched ahead like a ribbon of light, carrying them back toward Riverside, back toward whatever was waiting. Caleb called Mrs. Chen again when they were 30 minutes out. We're coming to get Nora, he said. Have her ready. We need to leave quickly. Caleb, you're frightening me. Please tell me what's going on. I will. I promise. Just trust me, okay? They reached Riverside at 2 in the morning. The streets were dead, the town sleeping. Mrs. Chen's house was dark except for the porch light. Caleb was out of the car before Celine had fully stopped, running up the steps, knocking urgently. Mrs. Chen opened the door with Nora in her arms, the girl still mostly asleep. Daddy? Nora's voice was confused, scared. It's okay, Peanut. We're going on a little trip. He took her from Mrs. Chen and carried her toward the car. Caleb Hayes, you tell me what's happening right now, Mrs. Chen demanded. I got involved in something I shouldn't have. Some bad people might come looking for me. I need to keep Nora safe. Then you leave her here with me. They don't know about me. They know everything, Mrs. Chen. I'm sorry. I never meant for any of this to happen. He strapped Nora into the back seat. She was more awake now, looking between him and Celine with wide eyes. Who's that lady? Nora asked. A friend. Her name's Celine. Is she the one who made you worried? Yeah, Peanut. She's the one. Celine was behind the wheel, engine running. Caleb climbed into the passenger seat and they pulled away from Mrs. Chen's house, leaving the old woman standing on her porch looking confused and afraid. Where are we going? Nora asked from the back seat. Caleb looked at Celine. She looked back at him. Somewhere safe, Celine said. I promise. But as they drove through Riverside's empty streets, none of them believed it. Because safe didn't exist anymore. Not for them. Not until this was over. They drove east, away from Riverside, away from everything familiar. Celine kept checking the mirrors while Caleb twisted around every few minutes to look at Nora, who sat clutching Mr. Whiskers with both hands, her eyes too wide for 3 in the morning. Daddy, I'm scared, she whispered. I know, Peanut, but we're okay. I promise we're okay. You're doing the eyebrow thing. Despite everything, Caleb almost smiled. Yeah, I am. Celine took them north on Highway 97, toward the mountains. The road was empty at this hour, just their headlights cutting through the darkness and the occasional semi-hauling freight through the night. After 40 minutes, she turned onto a smaller road that climbed into the foothills. There's a cabin, she said, about 20 miles from here. Belongs to a colleague from my old life, someone who left Archon before I did. She won't ask questions. How do you know she's not compromised? Because she's been off-grid for 2 years. Grows her own food, generates her own power, doesn't own a cell phone. If Archon knew about her, they would have come for her already. Celine navigated a sharp curve. We'll be safe there. At least long enough for me to release the files. And then what? Then we see what happens. It wasn't much of a plan, but it was all they had. The cabin appeared just before dawn, a small structure tucked among pine trees, smoke rising from a chimney that suggested someone was awake. Celine parked behind the cabin, out of sight from the road, and killed the engine. A woman emerged onto the porch before they could knock. She was in her 50s, gray hair pulled back in a braid, wearing jeans and a flannel shirt. Her eyes went to Celine, then to Caleb and Nora, taking in the situation with the quick assessment of someone who'd learned to read danger. Celine Ward, the woman said. Didn't think I'd see you again. Hello, Rebecca. I need help. I can see that. Rebecca's gaze settled on Nora. Come inside. The child looks half frozen. The cabin's interior was warm and smelled like wood smoke and coffee. Rebecca directed them to a worn couch while she poured hot chocolate for Nora and coffee for the adults. She moved with efficient calm, like this wasn't the first time someone had shown up at her door in the middle of the night running from trouble. So, Rebecca said, settling into a chair across from them. What did you do? I got the files, Celine said. All of them. Rebecca's eyebrows rose. The Archon files, the ones you've been chasing for 3 years? Every transaction, every email, every piece of evidence I need to prove what they've been doing. Celine pulled out the USB drive and set it on the coffee table between them. But they know I have it, and they know about Caleb and his daughter. Rebecca looked at Caleb. You're the engineer, the one who worked on the E7. How did you? Celine told me about you months ago, said she might need your help someday. Rebecca's expression softened slightly. I'm sorry you got dragged into this, Mr. Hayes. Archon doesn't play nice when they feel threatened. I'm getting that impression. Nora had fallen asleep on the couch, exhausted from fear and the late hour. Caleb draped his jacket over her and stood, needing to move, to do something other than sit and wait for whatever came next. What's the plan? He asked Celine. I upload the files to every secure server I can access. Send copies to journalists, whistleblower organizations, regulatory agencies. Make it impossible for Archon to contain. She opened her laptop. It'll take a few hours to prepare everything properly. Make sure the encryption is solid, that the files can't be traced back to this location. And you think that'll be enough? They'll just let us go? No. But once the information is public, killing us becomes pointless. We're no longer the only ones who know. She met his eyes. It's not a perfect solution, Caleb, but it's the best I've got. Rebecca stood and moved to a closet, pulling out blankets and pillows. You all need rest, especially the girl. I'll keep watch while you sleep. Rebecca, you don't have to. Yes, I do. You helped me when I needed it, Celine. Remember? When Archon was coming after me and I didn't know where to turn? Rebecca's voice was firm. This is me returning the favor. Now get some sleep. You look like death warmed over. Caleb wanted to argue that he couldn't sleep, that every minute counted, that they needed to keep moving. But his body was shutting down whether he liked it or not. The adrenaline that had carried him through the past 24 hours was finally burning out. Celine showed him to a small bedroom at the back of the cabin. Nora was already asleep on the couch, Rebecca covering her with a quilt. Caleb hesitated in the doorway. She'll be fine, Rebecca said gently. I raised 3 daughters. I know how to watch over a sleeping child. Thank you. He returned to the bedroom where Celine was setting up her laptop on a small desk. You should sleep too, he said. I will, after I start the upload process. Her fingers moved across the keyboard with practiced speed. Go ahead. I'll wake you if anything happens. Caleb lay down on the bed, fully clothed, and closed his eyes. Sleep came faster than expected, pulling him under into dreams of black SUVs and men with guns and Nora's voice asking why he was worried. He woke to sunlight streaming through the window and the smell of bacon. For a confused moment, he thought he was home, that the past 2 days had been a nightmare. Then he saw Celine asleep in the chair by the desk, her laptop still open, and reality crashed back. The clock on the wall read 9:15. He'd slept for almost 5 hours. Caleb stood carefully, trying not to wake Celine, and walked to the main room. Nora was sitting at Rebecca's kitchen table, eating pancakes and talking quietly about school. She looked up when she saw him. Daddy, Miss Rebecca makes really good pancakes. I can see that. He sat down next to her and accepted a plate from Rebecca. You doing okay, Peanut? Miss Rebecca said we're on an adventure, like camping but in a house. Rebecca gave him a look that said she'd explained as much as an 8-year-old needed to know. Caleb nodded his thanks. That's right. An adventure. When do we go home? Soon. I hope. He ate mechanically, not tasting the food, his mind already spinning through possibilities. If Celine had uploaded the files overnight, Archon would know by now. They'd be scrambling to contain the damage, to spin the story, to protect themselves. The question was whether they'd still come after Celine and Caleb, or if public exposure would be enough to make them back off. Celine appeared in the doorway, looking rumpled and tired, but more alert than she'd been last night. It's done. I uploaded everything to 12 different servers, sent copies to 43 journalists and 16 government agencies. The files are out there now, publicly accessible. And, Caleb asked, and we wait to see if anyone actually cares. She poured herself coffee and sat down. I included my contact information with the files. If any journalist wants to verify the information or needs additional context, they can reach me. That's a risk. Everything about this is a risk. She wrapped her hands around the coffee mug. But I'm done hiding. If Archon wants to come after me, let them. At least now there's a record of what they've done. Rebecca was standing by the window, looking out at the trees. You should know there's a car coming up the access road. Black sedan, 2 occupants. Caleb's blood went cold. How far? Quarter mile. Maybe less. Celine was already moving, grabbing her laptop, shoving the USB drive into her pocket. Back door? Through the kitchen, there's a trail that leads deeper into the woods. Rebecca pulled a hunting rifle from a rack on the wall. I'll slow them down. Rebecca, no. This is my property. I'm allowed to greet uninvited guests however I see fit. The older woman's expression was calm but determined. Get the child and go. Now. Caleb scooped up Nora, who immediately sensed something was wrong and wrapped her arms around his neck. Celine led them through the kitchen and out the back door into the pine forest that surrounded the cabin. They'd made it maybe 200 yards when they heard voices from the cabin. Men's voices. Professional and cold. Rebecca's response was too quiet to make out, but her tone was defiant. Then a gunshot. Caleb stopped, every instinct screaming at him to go back, to help. Celine grabbed his arm and pulled him forward. We can't help her by getting caught, she hissed. Keep moving. They ran through the forest, Nora clinging to Caleb, branches whipping at their faces. Behind them, more shouts, more footsteps. The men were following. The trail opened onto a logging road. Celine looked both ways, then started running west. There's a highway about 2 miles this direction. If we can reach it. A black SUV appeared around the bend, blocking their path. Celine skidded to a halt, pulling Caleb back toward the trees. But it was too late. Men were emerging from the forest behind them, cutting off their escape. They were surrounded. 4 men in dark suits, all armed, all watching them with the patient confidence of people who'd already won. From the SUV, a 5th man emerged. Marcus Thorne looked exactly like he had on the news. Silver hair, expensive suit, that smile that didn't reach his eyes. He approached slowly, hands in his pockets, completely at ease. Ms. Ward, he said pleasantly, you've caused quite a bit of trouble. Good. Celine's voice was steady despite the guns pointed at them. I hope I caused enough to destroy everything you've built. Destroy? My dear, you've barely made a dent. Yes, some journalists received your files this morning. A few are even looking into them. But do you really think it matters? Thorne's smile widened. I have lawyers who'll tie up any investigation for years. I have friends in government who'll classify the information as national security. I have media connections who'll bury the story beneath a dozen other scandals. Someone will listen, someone will care. Perhaps, eventually, but by then, the damage will be contained. Archon will pay a fine, make some changes, continue operating under a different name. We always do. He turned his attention to Caleb. Mr. Hayes, I wish you'd stayed out of this. You had a quiet life, a daughter who needed you. Now look where we are. Caleb held Nora tighter. She had her face buried against his shoulder, trembling. Let her go. She's got nothing to do with any of this. I agree. The child is innocent. Thorne's expression didn't change, which is why I'm going to make you an offer. Give me the drive. Walk away. Forget this ever happened. I'll make sure you and your daughter are taken care of. Enough money to pay off your debts, a good job, a fresh start. And if I refuse, then I make a different kind of arrangement, one that involves child protective services and a father deemed unfit to raise his daughter alone. Thorne's voice hardened. You're broke, Mr. Hayes, working a minimum wage job, drowning in debt, living in an apartment that barely meets code. How long do you think it would take me to build a case that you're an unstable influence? Rage flooded through Caleb so fast he nearly dropped Nora. You son of a... Think about what you're saying, Celine interrupted, stepping between Caleb and Thorne. You're threatening a child to cover up your crimes. Do you really think that makes you look reasonable? I think it makes me realistic. I'm offering Mr. Hayes a way out that protects his daughter. That's more generous than he deserves, considering he helped you steal proprietary information. Thorne held out his hand. The drive, Ms. Ward. Celine's hand moved toward her pocket. Caleb could see her weighing the options, calculating whether surrendering was the smart play. Then Nora lifted her head from Caleb's shoulder and spoke. My daddy's not a bad person. Everyone turned to look at her. She was crying, tears streaming down her face, but her voice was clear. He works really hard. He takes care of me even when he's tired. He reads me stories and makes me breakfast and checks my homework even when he doesn't understand it. Nora looked directly at Marcus Thorne. You're the bad person. You're the one doing wrong things. Thorne's smile finally cracked. The child doesn't understand. She understands better than you think. Rebecca's voice cut through the forest. She was standing at the edge of the clearing, her rifle aimed at Thorne's chest. Blood stained her shoulder, but her hands were steady. You're on my property, threatening a child. I've got every legal right to defend my guests. Mrs. Shaw, I was hoping we could resolve this without further violence. Thorne's tone remained pleasant, but his eyes were calculating. You're injured. You need medical attention. Why don't you put down the rifle and let us handle this? Why don't you get the hell off my land before I handle you? Rebecca took a step forward. I've already called the county sheriff. He's about 10 minutes out. You've got that long to disappear before this becomes a lot more complicated for everyone. It was a bluff. Caleb could tell from the way Rebecca's voice wavered slightly. But Thorne didn't know that. His expression shifted, frustration breaking through the polished exterior. You're making a mistake, he said to Celine. All of you. This doesn't end here. You're right, it doesn't. Celine pulled out her phone, a different burner, bought somewhere along the way. Because I'm not the only one who has the files anymore. While you were busy chasing us through the woods, a journalist from the Washington Post just went live with the story. Complete with documents, financial records, and emails between you and Victor Reeves discussing illegal weapons sales. Thorne's face went pale. You're lying. Check your phone. Celine's smile was cold. I set the release for 9 o'clock this morning. Right about now, it should be trending on every social media platform. The headline is particularly good. Defense contractor Archon Industries accused of building private army. Has a nice ring to it. Thorne pulled out his phone. Caleb watched the color drain further from his face as he read whatever was on the screen. The other men shifted uncomfortably, looking at each other, suddenly uncertain. This changes nothing, Thorne said, but the confidence was gone from his voice. My lawyers will... Your lawyers are already getting calls, I'm sure. Along with every regulatory agency, every congressional committee with oversight, and probably the FBI. Celine stepped closer to him. You were right about one thing, Marcus. You have friends in high places, but you also have enemies. People who've been waiting for an excuse to bring you down. I just gave them that excuse. From the distance came the sound of sirens. Rebecca's bluff about calling the sheriff might not have been entirely false after all. Thorne looked at Celine, then at Caleb and Nora, then back at his men. For a moment, Caleb thought he might try something desperate, order his men to shoot, to eliminate the witnesses, to go down fighting. Instead, Thorne turned and walked back to his SUV. This isn't over, he said over his shoulder. Yes, it is. Celine's voice followed him. You're done, Marcus. You just don't know it yet. The SUV drove away. The other men followed in their sedan, leaving Caleb and Celine and Nora standing in the forest with Rebecca, who finally lowered her rifle and sat down heavily on a fallen log. That shoulder needs looking at, Caleb said. I've had worse. Rebecca winced. But yeah, probably should get it checked. That one of them got a lucky shot while I was buying you time. The sheriff arrived 15 minutes later, a grizzled man in his 60s who took one look at the situation and called for backup and an ambulance. Rebecca gave a statement that was carefully edited to remove most of the details about Archon and focus on trespassers making threats. The sheriff looked skeptical, but didn't push. By noon, they were at a small clinic in the nearest town. Rebecca's wound was superficial, a graze that needed cleaning and bandaging, but nothing serious. Nora had fallen asleep in Caleb's lap, exhausted from fear and adrenaline. Celine was on her phone, talking to journalists, giving interviews, directing people to the files she'd uploaded. Her voice was hoarse, but determined. Is it really over? Caleb asked when she finally hung up. The immediate danger? Probably. Archon's in full damage control mode. Marcus Thorne is already denying everything, but the evidence is solid enough that even his lawyers are going to have trouble making it disappear. She sat down next to him. There will be investigations, trials, probably years of legal battles, but the story's out there now. People are paying attention. And us? What happens to us? You go home. Back to Riverside, back to your life. I'll make sure Archon understands that coming after you or Nora would be the stupidest thing they could do. Celine looked at him. You're a witness now, which means you're protected, at least in theory. What about you? I'll testify when they need me. Probably end up in some kind of protective custody until the trials are over. She smiled weakly. Not exactly the ending I imagined, but better than running for the rest of my life. 3 days later, Caleb and Nora were back in Riverside. Mrs. Chen had hugged them both so tight Caleb thought his ribs might crack, then spent an hour scolding him for getting involved in dangerous nonsense, while simultaneously praising him for doing the right thing. Patterson had fired him, of course, told him he didn't need that kind of trouble associated with his business. Caleb had expected it, but it still stung. He was sitting on his apartment's couch, trying to figure out how to pay next month's rent with no job and dwindling savings when someone knocked on the door. Angela Park stood in the hallway, holding a briefcase and wearing a smile. Hey, stranger, got a minute? Caleb let her in. Angela looked around the apartment with the same expression everyone wore when they visited, sympathy mixed with discomfort. I heard what happened, she said. The news is calling you a hero. Automotive engineer helps expose corporate corruption. Pretty catchy. Yeah, well, heroics don't pay the bills. That's actually why I'm here. Angela set her briefcase on the coffee table and opened it. The startup I work for, we're developing new battery systems for electric vehicles. Cutting-edge stuff, completely legitimate. We need someone who understands vehicle architecture and isn't afraid to ask tough questions about safety. She pulled out a document and handed it to Caleb. It was a job offer. Senior systems engineer, salary that was 3 times what Patterson had been paying him. Benefits, stock options, flexible hours. Angela, I can't. I'm blackballed from the industry. No one will hire me. You were blackballed. Past tense, after what you did, exposing Archon, companies are actually competing to hire you. You're proof that someone can have principles and still be valuable. She pushed the document toward him. This is a real offer, Caleb. Think about it. He did think about it. For about 3 seconds. Then he signed. 4 months passed. The Archon story dominated the news cycle for weeks before being gradually replaced by newer scandals. Marcus Thorne was indicted on 17 counts of fraud, conspiracy, and illegal weapons trafficking. The trial was scheduled for the following year. Caleb started his new job and found that he was good at it. Better than good, actually. The work challenged him in ways he'd forgotten he needed. His colleagues respected him. For the first time in years, he felt like he was building something that mattered. Nora was thriving too. New shoes, new clothes, enrollment in a better school where Kayla Roberts' mother couldn't whisper about how poor they were. She still slept with Mr. Whiskers and still called him out when his eyebrow got scrunchy, but the fear that had haunted her eyes after that night in the forest was gradually fading. Celine called once a week. She was living in a secure location, working with prosecutors to build the case against Archon. Her voice always sounded tired, but also lighter somehow, like a weight had been lifted. How's Nora? She asked during one call. Good. Growing like a weed, asking about you constantly. Tell her I miss her too. A pause. Caleb, I've been thinking. After the trial, after all this is over, I'm not sure what I'm going to do, where I'm going to go. You could come back to Riverside. Would that be weird? Me just showing up in your life? Probably, but the good kind of weird. He smiled even though she couldn't see it. We've got a spare bedroom now. Bigger apartment, better neighborhood. Nora's already claimed it as Celine's room in case you visit. I'd like that, visiting. Me too. The trial started in March. Caleb testified for 3 days, walking the jury through the technical details of how they'd accessed the E7's computer system. Celine testified for a week, her voice steady as she described years of financial manipulation and illegal deals. Marcus Thorne's lawyers argued that their client had been misled by subordinates, that he'd had no direct knowledge of the illegal activities. But the evidence was overwhelming. The jury deliberated for 6 hours before returning with guilty verdicts on all counts. 52 years in federal prison. No possibility of parole for the first 20. Caleb watched the verdict on TV with Nora curled up next to him. When they announced the sentence, she looked up at him. Is it over now, Daddy? Yeah, Peanut, it's over. Good. I didn't like being scared. Me neither. 2 weeks after the verdict, Celine showed up at Caleb's apartment. She was driving a sensible sedan, wearing jeans and a sweater, looking more relaxed than he'd ever seen her. "I hear you have a room available," she said when he opened the door. "Depends. How long are you staying?" "I don't know yet. Is that okay?" Nora appeared behind Caleb, saw Celine, and shrieked with delight. She launched herself at the woman, who caught her and held her tight. "I told Daddy you'd come back," Nora said into Celine's shoulder. "I told him you promised." "I always keep my promises." Celine looked over Nora's head at Caleb. "If the offer's still open?" "It's open. Come on in." She did. Over the following months, Celine became part of their lives in ways Caleb hadn't expected, but found himself grateful for. She helped Nora with homework, cooked dinner when Caleb worked late, made the apartment feel less like a temporary shelter and more like a home. They didn't talk much about Archon or the trial or those terrifying days when everything had hung in the balance. That part of their story was over, filed away in testimony and evidence lockers. What they talked about instead was ordinary things. Nora's school projects, Caleb's work developing new safety systems that might actually save lives, Celine's consulting work helping other whistleblowers navigate the legal system. One evening, after Nora had gone to bed, Caleb and Celine sat on the apartment's small balcony, watching the stars. "You ever regret it?" Celine asked quietly. "Getting involved with all of this?" "Every day for the first month, then less and less." He glanced at her. "You?" "I regret that you and Nora got dragged into danger. I regret that Rebecca got hurt. But the outcome? No. I don't regret that." She was quiet for a moment. "I spent so long running, hiding, trying to stay one step ahead. It's strange now, being able to just exist without looking over my shoulder constantly." "Strange good or strange bad?" "Strange good, definitely strange good." She looked at him. "Thank you for taking a chance on me, for believing me when you had every reason not to. You made it pretty hard not to believe you. What with the corporate conspiracies and the armed men and the dramatic car chases?" She laughed. "Yeah, I don't do anything halfway." "No, you really don't." They sat in comfortable silence. Two people who'd been broken by different circumstances, who'd found each other at exactly the right moment, who'd survived something that should have destroyed them. Inside the apartment, Nora stirred in her sleep, calling out for Caleb. He stood to check on her, but Celine waved him back down. "I'll go. You rest." She disappeared inside, and Caleb heard her soft voice talking to Nora, reassuring her, promising she was safe. The same things he'd been saying for 4 years, but somehow more believable when Celine said them. Because they were true now. They were safe. Not perfectly, not permanently, but enough. Caleb's phone buzzed with an email. A message from Angela about a new project the company was starting. Advanced safety systems for autonomous vehicles. They wanted his input on the design. He typed out a reply, accepting the assignment, then set the phone down and looked out at Riverside spread below him. The town looked different than it had a year ago. Bigger somehow, full of possibility instead of just problems. Or maybe it wasn't the town that had changed. Maybe it was him. Celine returned to the balcony. "She's asleep again. Bad dream about being chased." "Those are getting less frequent." "Yeah, they are." She sat back down. "For all of us, I think." Inside, Nora slept soundly. Mr. Whiskers clutched to her chest. Outside, the world kept turning, full of injustice and corruption and people who thought they were untouchable, but also full of people like Caleb and Celine and Rebecca and Angela. People who refused to look away when they saw something wrong. People who'd risk everything to do what was right, even when the odds were impossible. Especially when the odds were impossible. Caleb had spent 4 years believing his story had ended with Sarah's death, that he was just running out the clock, trying to keep Nora safe until she was old enough to take care of herself. But sitting here on this balcony with Celine beside him, and his daughter asleep inside, and a job that challenged him, and a future that didn't look quite so bleak, Caleb realized something. His story hadn't ended. It had just been waiting to begin. And what a beginning it was.